Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 2 based on novel. So let's start. Joining the desolate hall? Everyone on the hall selection stage was stunned by Lin Dong's words. One by one, their gazes turned towards him in shock. Only little Martin and little Flame remained calm. Lin Dong, you, even Wu Dao had a stunned expression due to Lin Dong's words. Clearly, he did not understand why the latter would give up on the strongest Sky Hall and choose to join their desolate hall instead. The surprised expression on the Deputy Sky Hall chief gradually faded away. He stared intently at Lin Dong before frowning slowly. After which, he spoke in a deep voice, Lin Dong, you are quite talented. Do not ruin your future. Although I have no intention of looking down on the desolate hall, I do dare to say to you that your talents will be best developed in the Sky Hall. Although the mouths of Wu Dao and the others twitched a little because of Wei Sheng's words, they did not object. Currently, the Sky Hall was indeed the strongest amongst the four halls. Lin Dong smiled bitterly and said, I think that the desolate hall is likely more suitable for me. Deputy Hall Chief Wu Dao, what do you think? Lin Dong's eyes also looked towards Wu Dao when he spoke until the end, while he purposefully dragged his words. Was this old fellow not going to speak up? At the very least, this old fellow should not allow him to endure the sharp eyes of these upper echelons of the Dao sect alone. Wu Dao's old face quivered a little upon hearing this. Lin Dong could see some joy within his eyes. However, after this old fellow hesitated for a moment, he finally uttered some words that almost made Lin Dong vomit blood. The Sky Hall is indeed stronger than the desolate hall. This old fellow is too honest, no? Lin Dong was speechless. He clearly did not expect this old fellow to push aside a good seedling that had been delivered to him. However, if you really wish to join our desolate hall, this old man will definitely support you. In any case, we will not ill-treat you. Wu Dao clenched his teeth and said. Lin Dong finally sighed quietly. After which, his eyes were apologetic as he looked towards Wei Sheng, who had a somewhat ugly expression. He did not wish to offend the deputy chief of the Sky Hall the moment he arrived at the Dao sect. Wei Sheng knitted his brows and stared at Lin Dong. A moment later, he could only shake his head and spoke in a faint voice, since this is your choice, this hall chief is not in a position to say anything. I just hope that you know what you are doing. Lin Dong finally let out a slight sigh of relief when he heard that Wei Sheng's tone did not contain much grudge. The upper echelon of this Dao sect was not as narrow-minded as he had imagined. You are really too selfish. However, a clear, lovely voice suddenly sounded when Lin Dong sighed in relief. Lin Dong was startled. He raised his head and saw that the red-clothed young lady was bunching her eyebrows together and staring at him. In what way am I selfish? Although this young lady in front of him was a little live beauty, Lin Dong still felt quite displeased with her words. He immediately frowned and demanded. You are quite talented. If you join the Sky Hall, you will naturally be able to utilize the most of your potential. If you become stronger, this will be good for our sect. Yet, you have chosen to give up on this path. From a certain point of view, you have caused the strength of our sect to be a little weaker. Aren't you being selfish? That red-clothed young woman's voice was very clear. A soft musical instrument sound accompanied her words when she spoke. One's heart felt relaxed and happy upon hearing it. However, the sharpness of her words caused everyone to be stunned. Such a sharp tongue. These words not only echoed the thoughts within Lin Dong's heart. Even Liu Bai and the rest behind him ended up facing each other. They must admit the eloquence of this young lady. Originally, it was merely an ordinary selection. Yet she had actually dragged this issue to such major sect-related matters. I think that there is no strongest hall. There should only be a hall that is most suitable for oneself, right? Lin Dong rubbed his nose and said. That is true in theory. However, the current reality is that the Sky Hall is the strongest of the four halls. The red-clothed young lady raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were filled with an offensive stance as she stared at Lin Dong. I dare to tell you that even after joining the Desolate Hall, you will likely not even possess the qualification to be even shortlisted for the next hall test. At that time, your 100 Empire War Champion's reputation might just become a joke. Lin Dong frowned slightly. His eyes also stared at the red-clothed lady in front of him without giving in. He said, "Since you have elevated this issue, I shall also tell you my reason. I do not like to do things in a mediocre fashion. Joining the Sky Hall might be the most beneficial to me, but it will not allow me to improve myself to the greatest extent. This is because the Sky Hall does not have the Great Desolation Scripture. If I am able to comprehend the Great Desolation Scripture, do you think that the strength of the Tao sect will be strengthened or weakened by a little?" Everyone were once again startled when Lin Dong spoke. Only then did they come to a sudden realization. This fellow was actually headed to the Desolate Hall for the Great Desolation Scripture. However, this person was a little too arrogant, no? The Great Desolation Scripture is the most mysterious and unfathomable martial arts amongst the 4 great mysterious scriptures. Even after so many years, the number of geniuses in Desolate Hall, who have comprehended it, would not exceed 10. Yet, Lin Dong actually dared to utter such words? The red-clothed young lady was clearly startled by Lin Dong's words. However, her lips immediately lifted into a slight arc. After which, she extended her hand. Her long finger pointed at Lin Dong as her red lips parted slightly. Such arrogant words. You really think too highly of yourself. Only when the red-clothed young lady pointed her finger, did Lin Dong realize that her hand was exceptionally beautiful. It was long and fair, appearing just like a perfect suet jade. Her long suet jade fingers were well proportioned like the golden ratio. It did not possess the slightest flaw. Light flickered slightly on her finger, causing one's eyes to be a little dazzled. This was Lin Dong's first time seeing such a beautiful hand. A surprise also flashed across his eyes. The red-clothed young lady in front of him might not possess the most beautiful appearance amongst all the ladies that he had seen, but her hand was something no one could compare with. It is a little too early to discuss this. Whether I will be able to comprehend the Great Desolation Scripture will be witnessed by all of us in the future. What do you say? However, Lin Dong had not reached the point of losing himself even though he was truly surprised. His eyes turned, looked towards the red-clothed young lady and laughed in a faint voice. The might of the Great Desolation Scripture is something that I am indeed aware of. Those seniors that had once understood the Great Desolation Scripture were indeed renowned figures in our Tao sect. However, do you know just how many people had successfully comprehended it since the founding of the Tao sect? The red-clothed young woman laughed coldly and said, "Don't say that I am looking down on you. You can only blame yourself for being too ambitious. Since you wish for me to wait and see, all right, I, Ying Huan, shall wait and see if you are be able to comprehend the Great Desolation Scripture. In fact, I will do anything you wish if you succeed. However, if you fail to do so, it is likely that quite a number of Sky Hall disciples will come looking to spar with you, Junior. I look forward to it." Lin Dong smiled slightly. He was not afraid of these ruthless words from the other party. Even if he was unable to comprehend the Great Desolation Scripture, Lin Dong was not some weakling that anyone could pinch at will. Humph. Ying Huan could only let out a soft snort after speaking until this point. Her eyes contained some anger. Her usual sharp tongue was actually being blocked by Lin Dong today. This caused her to feel a little displeased in her heart. Since you little fellow has the wild ambition to target the Great Desolation Scripture of the Desolate Hall, this hall chief shall not say anything more. If you are truly able to accomplish your dream, it is likely that everyone within our Tao sect will be glad. However, at times, one should do things within one's limits. Wei Sheng spoke faintly. Even he did not have anything to say when Lin Dong brought out the Great Desolation Scripture. After all, even he had no choice but to admit that the Great Desolation Scripture was indeed the most powerful amongst the 4 great mysterious scriptures. If it was not because it was too difficult to comprehend, the Desolate Hall would have steadily held the strongest spot amongst the 4 halls. Is there anyone else who wished to join the Desolate Hall? Wei Sheng's eyes looked towards the other disciples that had been selected from the 100 Empire War and asked. Little Martin and Little Flame did not say anything unnecessary after hearing this. They directly stood beside Lin Dong. Liu Bai, Mo Ling and the rest hesitated for a moment before following. Things were clear-cut for them now. In any case, they had already followed Lin Dong to the Dao sect. It was best that they followed him all the way. Moreover, with their talent, it was likely that they would barely be able to enter the Sky Hall even if they could do so. In that case, it was best to follow Lin Dong and muddle within the desolate hall. Although these people had followed Lin Dong, most people did not act rashly. After all, these people did not have any relationship with Lin Dong. Naturally, they would not follow him to the weakest desolate hall. Lin Dong appeared quite calm in the face of this kind of situation. He had no intention to gathering people and forming a group. Mo Ling, Liu Bai, and the rest had followed him because they treated him as a friend. It was very natural for the others not to do so. Wei Sheng waved his sleeves upon seeing this scene. After which, some light rushed out. He chose some of the most talented individuals within the group. Soon after, the Earth Hall's and Flood Hall's Deputy Hall Chief also acted and divided the remaining people, who were fairly talented. Finally, those who were left behind were some whose talent were a little weaker. The disciple selection is over. We shall take our leave first. Wei Sheng did not plan to stay any longer after the disciple selection was completed. He cupped his hands together towards Wu Dao before taking a deep look at Lin Dong. With a wave of his sleeves, Yuan power surged. It transformed into a wild wind and directly swept away those disciples that had been selected. That brat called Lin Dong, remember your words. I am waiting for you to surprise me. However, before this, you should first obtain the qualification to study the Great Desolation Scripture first. Ying Huan shook her hands towards Lin Dong in a gloating fashion. After which, her lovely body moved and she swiftly followed Wei Sheng. While they were leaving, the Deputy Hall Chief of the Earth Hall and the Flood Hall also led their people away. In a moment, this stage had become much emptier. Lin Dong stretched his lazy waist and sighed helplessly. From the looks of it, he seemed to have offended this young lady of unknown origin the moment he arrived. Hey, little fellow, it is unexpected that you are actually in possession of such boldness. Wu Dao turned his head and smilingly stared at Lin Dong. A laughter filled his eyes. Deputy Hall Chief Wu Dao, we will be following you in the future. Please take good care of us. Lin Dong laughed. He had a little less of the restraint that he had in front of Wei Sheng when he was in front of Wu Dao. Don't use this on me. Although this old man is extremely happy with what you did, everything should still be done according to the rules. Wu Dao smilingly chided. After which, he suddenly whispered, but little fellow, once the matter of you rejecting to join the Sky Hall today spreads, the disciples from the Sky Hall might end up paying special attention to you. The smiling face of Wu Dao caused Lin Dong to be a little speechless. Was this old fellow gloating? That's right, that Ying Huan has an elder sister called Ying Xiao, a senior in the Sky Hall. She could be considered the strongest amongst the younger generation members of Dao sect. Since you have argued with Ying Huan today, it is likely that she will pay attention to you in the future. Good luck. I am rooting for you. Wu Dao fondled his chin and randomly said. Damn it. Even with Lin Dong's character, he involuntarily ended up cursing when he heard his words. This was just great. He had merely just selected a hall to train. Yet, he had ended up attracting all sorts of troubles. It was likely that his future days here would not be so smooth sailing. Desolate Hall is situated in the southwest corner of Dao sect. A dozen over giant peaks that touched the heavens formed a circle. On top of these giant peaks, streams of silver-like waterfalls poured down. A loud rumbling sound ricocheted across the entire domain. On top of these large peaks, one could see numerous large halls. Meanwhile, countless number of figures were just like ants as they traversed across it. It released a vibrant and prosperous atmosphere. Surrounding these large peaks was a several thousand-mile-long river that swept across it. It looked just like a river in heaven. When one got near to it, one could actually realize that this enormous river was actually formed from Nirvana Chi. A genuine pill river. The resources of these super sects evidently did not lose out much to those ancient sects. When Lin Dong saw that hovering Pill River, that was the first thought that flashed past his mind. Promptly, he was secretly excited by it. He had previously experienced the benefits from cultivating in a Pill River. However, due to time constraints in the ancient battlefield, he could not linger on and he only briefly enjoyed it before he left regretfully. Therefore, when he saw that there was actually a Pill River in Desolate Hall, his heart was naturally filled with joy. In Desolate Hall, there are 3,000 disciples and 300 direct disciples. All of them are excellent members who have been through the most stringent tests. On the outskirts, there are tens of thousands of branch disciples. If they are able to pass the tests, they are always welcome to become full-fledged disciples of Desolate Hall. Standing beside Lin Dong, Wu Dao pointed at several dozen large peaks. There was a tinge of pride in his tone. 300 direct disciples, 3,000 disciples, tens of thousands of branch disciples. When Lin Dong heard the figures, he was instantly shocked. He was clearly aware that in order to become a direct disciple of a super sect, according to the 100 Empire Wars rules, one must step into the Nirvana Golden ranking. However, right now, just the number of direct disciples of Desolate Hall already stands at 300. The 300 of them were obviously the elite and they must be top geniuses just like Lane Ying and the rest. Even after adding together the total number of Nirvana Golden ranking members in the current 100 Empire War, there was less than half of this number. Based on this, it seems like these super empires truly had many other avenues to recruit members. Lin Dong did not inquire about the 3 other halls. However, with just a rough gauge, he was able to deduce that their numbers surely exceed the Desolate Hall. It seems like the total strength of the Dao sect was truly terrifying. This also allowed Lin Dong to clearly witness the terror of a super sect. By possessing such strength, in the eastern Xian region, how could any empire compete with such a monstrous beast? With these terrifying disciples as a foundation, one sect would definitely become powerful. Lin Dong, based on your performance, you naturally possess the qualifications to become a direct disciple. However, there is something that this old man must mention. Even in the Desolate Hall, you will face intense competition. Therefore, if you want to enjoy preferential treatment, you must prove yourself. Else, you will be quickly replaced. Wu Dao's expression was solemn as he stared at Lin Dong and said, "This type of competition is also a way to train our disciples. Therefore, we will not easily intervene in fights between disciples. If you want to continue to enjoy your privileges, the only thing you require is the ability to assert your right. You are the current champion of the 100 Empire War and you have recruited many disciples for our Dao sect. We will naturally have to reward you for it. However, whether you have the ability to enjoy this reward, will still depend your own abilities." "What reward?" Lin Dong smiled as he curiously asked. "Pill River head immersion." Wu Dao gently smiled as he pointed to that massive Pill River and leisurely said, "In the deep region of the Pill River, there will be some extremely pure Nirvana Chi generated each year. We term it as the Nirvana Golden Chi. That stuff is extremely beneficial for Nirvana stage practitioners. At that time, the Hall Master and I will personally manipulate the Nirvana Golden Chi to temper your body and your internal Yuan power. If you are able to handle it, your strength would surely surge." "Sounds pretty good." Lin Dong's eyes gently lit up. Something that required the combined efforts of both Hall Master must be pretty good. Of course it is. This Nirvana Golden Chi is originally reserved for Desolate Hall's top disciple. If it was not for the fact that you have performed a service of great merit, you will not be able to enjoy it. Wu Dao rolled his eyes at Lin Dong and said, "Who is the strongest disciple in Desolate Hall now?" Lin Dong gently smiled and asked. "The 4 senior direct disciples. All of them are at 7 Yuan Nirvana stage and they are no pushovers." With his hands behind his back, Wu Dao sadistically teased. 7 Yuan Nirvana stage how? Lin Dong's eyes gently hardened. Promptly, he slowly nodded his head before he softly said, "They are powerful indeed. However, it is not difficult to overtake them. With Lin Dong's current strength, he could fight evenly with a 6 Yuan Nirvana stage expert. Therefore, if he continued to improve, he could most likely contend with a 7 yuan Nirvana stage expert. Right now, he had just entered the desolate hall. Therefore, he should have time to slowly catch up with those seniors. When he saw Lin Dong's smiling face, Wu Dao secretly nodded his head. He had personally witnessed Lin Dong's rise during the ancient battlefield. For a young man from a low-rank empire to stand out in the battlefield was already a miracle by itself. If you want to obtain the qualifications to learn the great desolate scripture, you must defeat them. However, that is for later. With regards to the Pill River head immersion that we promised, there are only a few rare individuals in Desolate Hall that have enjoyed this treatment. Since you are only a new disciple, there are bound to be some disciples who feel disgruntled. With regards to this issue, you would have relied on your own abilities. We will not intervene. Wu Dao casually said. Understood. Lin Dong gently smiled as he nodded his head. Besides, what do your two other friends plan to do? Wu Dao's eyes suddenly turned towards Little Martin and Little Flame, before he asked. He was clearly aware of their true identities. Therefore, he understood that Little Martin would not join Dao sect. In 2 days' time, I will depart together with Little Flame. Little Martin casually said. Depart? When Lin Dong heard his words, he was instantly shocked. Don't worry, I will take him out for a spin. There is a place in Eastern Xian region which is extremely beneficial for him. It is best for him to train over there. Little Martin smiled as he said. Big brother, second brother said that I will be able to improve rapidly at that place. Let me follow him first. If you face any problems, use the Yuan spirit to send a message to second brother. We will come immediately. Little Flame scratched his head while he grinned. Don't worry, with me around, nothing will happen. Little Martin smiled at Lin Dong. When he saw the situation, Lin Dong hesitated for a moment. Promptly, he chose not to dwell on this issue. The reason why Little Martin chose to follow Lin Dong was because he was worried for him. Now that he had joined the Dao sect, as long as no accidents occur, he should be in safe hands. In that case, Little Martin could enjoy more freedom. Furthermore, Lin Dong knew that Little Martin had many secrets. Since the latter did not wish to tell him, he did not want to ask him as well. Right now, he was still not powerful enough. Therefore, Little Martin's knowledge was of little use to him. All right, we have reached the desolate hall. All of you will take the rest of the day to recuperate. Tomorrow, we will head to the Pill River stage. At that time, we will perform the Pill River head immersion for you. Wu Dao led the crowd to a huge mountain. With a wave of his arm, several disciples immediately leapt forth. Following which, he looked at Lin Dong and the rest before he spoke. Yes. When they heard his words, the crowds responded respectfully. Wu Dao gently nodded his head. Promptly, a smile appeared on his face. Besides, congratulations on becoming official disciples of Desolate Hall. This can be considered as your home in the future. When they heard his words, a grateful expression surfaced on Liu Bai and the rest's faces. After a long and arduous journey, they had finally become disciples of a super sect. Just like the spot where Lin Dong and the rest reached, in the eastern side of Dao sect, there was also towering mountains. The atmosphere here was actually more majestic than the Desolate Hall. This was the place where the Sky Hall was located. In the sky above the Sky Hall, there was also a hovering Pill River. Furthermore, this Pill River was larger than the one at Desolate Hall. At a cursory glance, you could see no end to it and could only feel that rich and potent Nirvana chi drifting off from the river. It even caused its surroundings to warp. Upon closer inspection, one could see several floating platforms above the Pill River. Seated above the platform were several disciples quietly training. Streams of powerful vibrations continuously emerged from within their bodies. Most of these platforms were scattered around the surroundings of the Pill River. Nonetheless, typically speaking, the closer it go to the center of the Pill River, the less platforms there were. Meanwhile, the number of disciples seated above also decreased. A splitting wind sound suddenly rang out above the Pill River. Faintly, it was accompanied by the crisp sound of an instrument which sounded just like a tina. That noise caused several disciples to open their eyes to stare at that alluring figure flashing past the horizon. Meanwhile, they seemed to be intoxicated by that sound. The alluring figure in the sky did not bother about their glances as she directly headed to the deepest spot in the Pill River. Finally, she landed above the final platform. When that alluring figure landed, her red dress swayed. It was actually Ying Huan, who had previously bickered with Lin Dong. When she landed on that platform, she immediately looked in front. At the edge of that platform was a lady quietly seated down. Meanwhile, rich and potent Nirvana chi swiveled around her. That lady was dressed in black ceremonial robes and she had a slim figure. Her soft green hair was casually tied up by a green lace and the tip was faintly curved at a sharp angle. Her hands were placed on her knees and there was a seal on her jade fingers. Above her hand seal, a green longsword was placed between two seals, while a faint sword aura slowly emerged. It actually forcefully split apart the surrounding Nirvana chi. Sis. When Ying Huan saw the lady dressed in black ceremonial robes, she involuntarily pouted her tiny mouth. The lady in front of her was actually the number 1 younger generation member in Dao sect, the big sister of Sky Hall, Ying Xiao. On the platform, when the black-dressed lady heard the crisp voice behind her, her tightly shut eyes opened slowly. The corners of her mouth curled upward slightly, making her cold-looking face somewhat gentle in an instant. I thought you followed Uncle Wu Dao to select the new disciples? Why the long face? The black-dressed asked as her lily-white hands took hold of a green-colored long sword. Then, she stood up gracefully while looking at Ying Huan with a tinge of joy in her eyes. Don't mention it, Ying Huan furrowed her eyebrows and pouted her lips. She then continued, initially, I wanted to see how capable the champion of the 100 Empire War is. In the end, it turns out that he is just an arrogant idiot. Why? The black-dressed lady shifted her gaze towards the surging Pill River and exclaimed softly without making a big fuss. That fellow actually forsake the chance to enter the Sky Hall and chose the Desolate Hall instead. Ying Huan grumbled angrily. Oh. The black-dressed lady was slightly startled. She was just as surprised as Ying Huan. Apparently, this was the first time she heard of such an incident. That fellow said that he wants to learn the Great Desolate Scripture. He's quite ambitious, the black-dressed lady replied softly. He's indeed quite ambitious, but I'm afraid his ambition is what that's going to kill him in the end. If the Great Desolate Scripture is so easy to be mastered, the Desolate Hall would have surpassed the Sky Hall a long time ago. That time, Sis meditated before the Desolate Tablet for a month and still failed to learn anything from it. How can that fellow succeed then? Ying Huan snorted. I have no affinity with the Great Desolate Scripture. Others might actually be able to do so. The black-dressed lady pointed the tip of her green-colored long sword towards the Pill River. Traces of powerful sword aura began to emerge from the sword. To master the Great Desolate Scripture, one needs more than just affinity. Sis, don't tell me you think that fellow has a chance of succeeding. Ying Huan asked. The black-dressed lady turned her head slightly and replied softly, 20% chance. Are you saying he has a 20% chance of succeeding? How can it be? You haven't even met him yet. Ying Huan exclaimed while her eyes widened up. A person who comes from a low-ranked empire and is able to surpass those super empire's geniuses is no simpleton. Becoming the champion of the 100 Empire War doesn't depend on luck alone, the black dresses lady explained with a gentle voice. Who knows what will happen? There's nothing special about that lad, Ying Huan pouted her mouth unbelievably. Then, she continued, that fellow still dares to wager with me. Ying Huan rolled her eyes upon finishing her sentence. Just as she was about to start speaking again, the indifferent voice of the black-dressed lady came from behind, don't bother me with this kind of issue. There are a lot of people who are willing to stick up for you. You don't need me. I don't want to be distracted by such issues. I have more important things to care about. You merely lost by a single move to that Ling Qingshu from the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, ain't it? Ying Huan grumbled. However, just as she finished her sentence, she could sense the sword aura that was pervading the platform intensified in an instant. Following which, she quickly shut her mouth. Little girl, if you feel that you have too much freedom these days, I can confine you for a few days. The black-dressed lady's cold voice silenced Ying Huan instantly. Upon hearing this, Ying Huan turned her body and left without any hesitation. Upon hearing Ying Huan scuttle away, the black-dressed lady pursed her lips lightly. The green-colored long sword in her hand bolted upright abruptly. At that instant, the aura of the sword pervaded the entire sky. A 10,000 feet long rift split across the surging Pill River instantly. After quite a while, the rift then began to soothe down gradually. Vigorous Nirvana Chi formed in front of the black-dressed lady. Indistinctly, the Nirvana Chi materialized into an illusory figure. That figure appeared to be Ling Qingzhu. The black-dressed lady's eyes were as deep as an abyss. She reached out her slender lily-white index finger and dabbed the illusory figure lightly with it. Then, the aura of her sword surged forward and destroyed the illusory figure into nothingness. Ling Qingzhu, I will defeat you. The next day, as the morning sunshine poured over the Dao sect, an unusual commotion broke out stealthily across the enormous mountains of the desolate hall. This commotion originated from the spreading of the news that there was 100 Empire Wars champion among the desolate hall's newly selected disciples. Furthermore, this champion unconventionally forsook the chance to enter the Sky Hall. Instead, he chose to enter the desolate hall. Naturally, the issue that the desolate hall's disciples cared about the most was that this new disciple was going to receive the Pill River head immersion on his first day. Generally speaking, only those disciples who performed exceedingly well would be qualified to receive the Pill River head immersion. Clearly, a lot of disciples had been working hard for this privilege. However, no one had expected the privilege of the Pill River head immersion this year to be seized by a newcomer. Undoubtedly, this issue had infuriated numerous disciples. Even though they knew 100 Empire Wars champion could significantly increase the number of potential disciples in the future and such reward was completely deserving, they were still not happy about it. A newcomer like him, who had not even familiarized himself with the place, dared to claim such privilege. From the current batch of disciples' perspective, he obviously did not show any respect to his seniors. On the south of the desolate hall near to where the Pill River was, there was an exceptionally enormous mountain. On the mountain summit, there was a vast platform. At this point of time, the platform was swarming with people's shadows, appearing extremely crowded. In front of the platform, there was a group of people crowding around. In the center of the group, there was a grey-clothed guy looking gloomily at the Pill River ahead of him. Everyone could sense the anger within him. Senior Tong Chuan, don't be angry anymore. No one has expected this. Numerous desolate hall's disciples were consoling the grey-clothed guy, attempting to soothe the anger in his heart. While speaking, these disciples felt somewhat helpless. Even though they felt that Tong Chuan had the highest chance of obtaining the privilege of the Pill River head immersion among the direct disciples and he was fully committed to getting it, they did not expect a newly joined disciple to crash the party. Furthermore, this newcomer was one step faster in seizing the nomination. It was no wonder that Tong Chuan was so outraged. Humph, he's merely a new disciple. Even if he is the champion of the 100 Empire War, he still has to understand the concept of seniority. He has to stay in the desolate hall for at least 2 years to be qualified for the Pill River head immersion. Tong Chuan roared coldly. Upon hearing these words, the desolate hall's disciples surrounding Tong Chuan could only laugh bitterly. It seemed like Tong Chuan had no intention of letting the matter rest. Soon after, these disciples began to sympathize with the new disciple. Even though he had done a meritorious deed for the Dao sect, the desolate hall still had its own rules and regulations. Certain privileges had to be earned with capabilities. If Tong Chuan was to take action on purpose, even if the new disciple was able to obtain the privilege of the Pill River head immersion, his reputation would suffer significantly. With regards to his capability, the disciples surrounding Tong Chuan had not much worries about the latter. Tong Chuan had been in the desolate hall for 3 years and he had reached the 6 Yuan Nirvana stage. He was considered rather powerful among the direct disciples. Furthermore, that new disciple was reported to be only at the 4 Yuan Nirvana stage. At this moment, the number of disciples who had received the news and rushed towards the platform before Pill River was rather huge. Other than Tong Chuan, there was a lot of other direct disciples. However, these direct disciples were not as infuriated as Tong Chuan. They merely folded their arms and waited eagerly for what was going to happen next. They clearly knew that the new disciple, whose name was Lin Dong, would not obtain the privilege of the Pill River head immersion so easily. As numerous disciples waited on the Pill River platform, the sound of wind breaking echoed through the air suddenly. Soon after, more than 10 figures flew from afar and landed on the platform. The guy leading the group was Lin Dong himself. As Lin Dong and his counterparts arrived, the initially rowdy platform quietened down instantly. Numerous gazes converged on them. Most of their eyes contained a playful tinge. Lin Dong, who had just landed on the platform, could naturally sense the unusual atmosphere. However, his face did not show the slightest bit of surprise. He clearly understood that even though he was a direct disciple, a new disciple like him could not easily convince the crowd of his strength. Those disciples who were of higher seniority were bound to brood over the fact that he obtained the nomination for the Pill River head immersion. Lin Dong also knew how to deal with this kind of situation. Such a group of vigorous young men. Seems like you won't be lonely in the future, little Martin chuckled as he looked smilingly at the surrounding desolate hall's disciples. Lin Dong nodded his head slightly. Are you the direct disciple that has just entered the desolate hall, Lin Dong? Not long after Lin Dong appeared, Tong Chuan could not help but took a step forward and asked with a deep voice. There's going to be a good show. When the crowd saw Tong Chuan take a step forward, the same words echoed through their minds. Nice to meet you, senior, Lin Dong smiled and cupped his fist. Lin Dong, you have indeed done a meritorious deed for the Dao sect by becoming the champion of the 100 Empire War. However, I don't think it's wise to take credit for this. Every year, only one person is allowed to enjoy the Pill River head immersion. Given your current status in the hall, I'm afraid you're not qualified to enjoy this privilege. Therefore, Senior shall advise you to come and fight for this privilege again 2 years later. That might be a better decision for you, Tong Chuan said indifferently. Is it that I don't have the capability or the qualifications? Lin Dong smirked. Tong Chuan squinted his eyes and replied, since you have asked, I can only tell you that you have neither. Understood. Lin Dong nodded his head. Then, under the numerous astonished gazes from the desolate hall's disciples, Lin Dong cupped his fists towards Tong Chuan. Senior, please guide me. Tong Chuan was not the only one who wanted to establish dominance. As a newcomer, Lin Dong clearly understood the importance of such action as well. And right now, it seemed like the perfect chance to do so. This video will end here.